Hey guys, Matt, IronTrap Garage. We're back working on the Schroll 32 Coupe. Last video we got the paint all cleaned up and it is looking so cool. We brought some of the identity back of the car and I'm really excited. So kind of as a quick backstory for anybody that hasn't followed this project from day one, we found this car in an old garage in the Larry Schroll estate where he had 50 to 60 cars. I rescued 2 cars out of the estate, this being one of them. And this car Larry had bought, let's say in the early 60s, and had already been a drag car and a street strip hot rod since probably, we guess, the 50s. When he got it, he had put an Olds engine in it and he had never finished the car. So we are kind of picking up where he left off and trying to think somewhat like what he might have done back then if he had a little more skills, time, and money. So one of the things that wasn't done to the car was it did not have exhaust on it. We have a lot of really neat photos to show us the car with the engine in it and different stuff like that, but the car's not really finished or close to finished. So I need to figure out exhaust. I've been looking at a lot of old photos. A lot of the cars back in the mid 50s to early 60s that I see that are similar to this build, East Coast cars, a lot of them I see they either have one or two things: really wild pipes that come out the side and go down and you know, that look really cool, or they have the like megaphone style headers with some, you know, cutouts on them and then full exhaust that goes down the cowl and under the car back so you can run it and keep it a little mild. So I thought it just kept coming back to the second option. We did real wild exhaust on the Free T. It looks awesome. It's such a simple car that by adding that it kind of gives it a pop. This car, I think there's enough going on with the bright paint and how channeled it is and the Olds engine. I think this style header is a little bit better, something simple, and you can uncork it but still have full exhaust and drive it around on the street and it won't be as obnoxious. So what I did is I went to my buddy Harvey over at Palladino Metal Fab. Harvey has a kind of heavy duty fabrication shop that they do all kinds of stuff. I lean on him a lot of times because he has some really big machinery, press brakes and slip rolls and plasma tape, all kinds of stuff that he can do much more heavy duty work than I can. So he has a real big slip roll that he can roll 16 gauge in. So I went to him and said, hey, can you make me a set of these megaphone pieces that reduce in size from 3 inches down to 2 inches? And he said, yeah, no problem at all. So I wanted 16 gauge because a couple reasons why I had these made. People might be like, oh, you can buy them at the 1-800 you know, box store type online places, and the reason is a lot of those kits, I think the pipes are actually like too big. They're like, a lot of them are like 3.5 to 4.5 inches on the wide side of the megaphone. I think it looks a little large for a car like this. You rarely saw on the old cars that the fat end being that big. So what I did is went with a slightly smaller size. It is kind of like a lot of the old photos I saw. And I also wanted 16 gauge. A lot of those kits are 20 or 18 gauge. I think one of the secrets is also having a little bit thicker pipe. It gives a little better of a sound. And also some of the tubing we're using is also 16 gauge. So it makes my life a lot easier when I'm welding everything together to match the material thicknesses. So I had him roll these up. He just tacked them in place for me to give me the tube section. So this is a quick, easy way if you guys need to, if you want to make your own custom megaphone sections. Really, you can make these no problem by having someone slip roll a piece of 18 or 16 gauge for you, and then you can weld up the seam on the bottom, blend it all out, and you can have something that is, you know, affordable and custom made if you don't want to order something right from the store like I'm doing. So I got my mandrel bends here. I got some flanges that I ordered that are plasma cut for an Olds engine, and we're pretty much ready to start building. So I'm going to start working on mocking some of this up and figuring out angles and all that stuff, get this piece fixtured in place, and we can start just building everything in. Hopefully by the end of this we'll have a neat set of headers built. Away from the body a little bit. Alright, so I'm digging the angle that I have everything set at. Looks pretty good. It's a, you know, aggressive but not some crazy rake to the exhaust. So I have these exhaust flanges here that were, I don't know if they're water cut or laser jetted, that I got online. And one thing to mention is if you're working with a stock Olds, these center bolts for the center port. So this engine has Siamese ports, most of these early V8, overhead valve V8 engines and V8 engines in general, up until I think basically small block Chevy, I'm sure somebody will correct me, they had Siamese center ports, a lot of the, and most of the engines. So this is no different. These center bolts were longer on the Olds, so you can't use that anymore obviously. So we need to get these studs out, and then we can use the same size bolts throughout, and we can bolt this flange up here, and we can start kind of eyeballing where we want to put our bends out and just adjust this angle a little bit as we go, and should be good. Definitely need to chase the threads and the head just a little bit to make them all go together nicely, because we're probably going to be taking this on and off like a bunch. So, and on these flanges, the way they're made, because their center port is bigger, the way they did it is, and I guess that's how Olds did it as well, is this center port's a lot bigger than the outside one. So we have 1 3/4 tubing for the outside, and I think this is 2 1/8 or 2 1/4. I forget, I have the tubing over there. So that one, because it has 2 exhaust ports going into one, obviously you need to let it breathe a little better, so that's kind of a smart idea. So may even have to change these bolts I have there, bottoming out, so we'll have to go with shorter ones. Let me get them and just bolt it up and start messing with our bends. Alright, so I got the other flange mounted on the engine, and that's all good. Just took a little bit of hitting with a carbide burr just to get the bolts to all kind of fill in perfectly, and worked out pretty nice. So next thing is, we got 1 3/4 round, and we have a square hole. So we got to fit that in there. So the 1 3/4 is just a hair larger than the cutout in the flange. So what I'm going to do is basically put some cuts in the tubing here to kind of crush it in just a little bit, and then we can get it to fit in the hole. And then probably what I'll do is end up hammering in the corners to kind of stretch it out. Then we could fusion weld, get it all flush, and kind of fusion weld on the back side, and then weld around the around the other side once we get it, when we're finish everything up. But I think that's the best way, is to just kind of put some cuts in here to kind of squeeze it in and get it tapped down. And when it's basically level, then we know where we need to be, and we'll just have to kind of move the metal around just like we would with sheet metal. Alright, so I got this all shrunk down. I got all the edges are pretty much touching in here, which is good. It'll make my life a little easier when I weld those slits up and blend them all in. I'm going to heat. There's a little bit of a high spot here where the transition is. I'll probably, once I get this tacked, I'll probably heat and kind of shrink that down into itself, and it'll flow kind of nicely. But what we want is a nice tight fit here, which we have. And when I wiggle this thing down in, we're just about, I can push it down to pretty much flush and have it wherever we want it. And then, like I said, in these corners where there's the gaps, once we start getting stuff tacked, I can take a pick hammer and use a little bit of heat or whatever. I could probably pick it cold and knock those corners, out, stretch them out and get them in. So this is kind of starting process, just down and dirty, hot rodding. There's probably ways you could make fancy tooling to do this quicker, but this is just the way to kind of do it. So now I got this fitting on my extra one pretty good. I'm going to go over and start test fitting this on the engine, see if we can get this piece kind of flowing into that large megaphone section. That'll be cool. Just gotta shrink this pipe down here. Same thing. Alright, so I got my pipe locked up, got my Eastwood welder all set up, ready to go. And what I ended up doing, I got those slits and I hammered and dollied them, got everything kind of like flowing in pretty good. And I used a hose clamp to keep everything tight so it's nice and tight around that pipe there, so I can throw a few tacks on it and get it all set up. It should work out pretty good. I'm liking how it's looking. A good flow to it. So I'm gonna throw some tacks on there. That gets one piece kind of put together, and then we can start working on the rest. Alright, so I got one side tacked up, and man, this thing is looking killer. Love it. So I'm really liking the slightly smaller exit pipe here. It's just not quite as obnoxious. There's enough room here I can basically get my hand in between the pipe here, so it should be okay as far as that goes. Again, the hardest part with this whole thing was we're going from a square opening into a round tube, and this is like on the center one it's like a rectangular, so I had to kind of like build little extensions that were square and then butt weld the tubing to it and kind of blend it all together and fill it and do all that stuff. So it took a lot of time. I have this all tacked up. I welded this one just a little bit to get it kind of steady in place, but everything's off the jack stands. Really happy with how that's looking. So now that I got that one going, that's kind of like the easy part, I guess. I got to sort of half match the other side, or do as good of a job as I can, but everything's kind of going in the right position. I'm really happy with it. So it's tacked to the flange, so we could take the whole header off when the time comes, and we can kind of weld everything on the bench. I'll probably use an old exhaust manifold. So I'm gonna get moving on the other side, and hopefully it goes a little quicker now that I kind of have the process down a little bit better. Should be able to knock out that other side pretty quickly. Alright, so last night before I called it quits, I got this side all tacked up as far as the main pipe goes from the front cylinder back, and it was a lot of work to get this all to kind of flow the same as the other side. I had to measure up and down. Of course, that's why I was by myself working, so it made it even more tough. So I had to measure, kind of like the height off of the floor. I had to level the frame and get all that kind of going, and then measure, front to back, and the spacing between the hinge and the end of the pipe and all that stuff. And I got everything pretty darn close, and I'm pretty happy with it. Now I ended up, just because I was by myself and I couldn't get the thing to sit on its own, I ended up tacking this pipe to the flange, which will work out okay. But the one thing I didn't cover on the other side I wanted to show is on these Olds engines, the front and rear port are square, because they're single cylinders. The center is Siamese, like a lot of these early overhead valve or early V8 engines in general. So this one has a big rectangular opening on it. It's like 2 1/4 inches across, I think, something like that. And this one, you're able to cut the corners and make the tube a square at the end, and it worked out pretty good. It's definitely cleaner on this one than the other side, but hey, we're learning as we go. So what I did is I dug around on my parts shelf or surplus metal shelf I have over here. If you guys don't have one of these, you should definitely get one, even if it's not as large as what I got going on here. But I keep all my drops and cut off pieces and things from bracing bodies, all that stuff. You never know when you're going to need it. And I even have pieces of old wishbones and stuff like that, cross members I throw in there, because just never know when you're going to need any of that stuff. Keep my pattern material on the bottom. But what I found was I needed a way to make that rectangular opening, because I was having trouble out of the round tubing. So I have what ended up working really well, and I didn't show it on the first one, is this piece of a wishbone that I cut apart. I think it's a front radius rod, and I cut the front off for the spring hanger section to make a hairpin for one of the cars, maybe Sweetheart Roadster, and I had this left over. So here's a piece I had sawed off, and you can see it's got like a rectangular shape to it, and it fits right inside of that opening. Of course, the corners aren't squared, so there is a small gap that you need to work around, but I don't think that's too big of a deal, honestly. So this piece here can fit in like that, and now we have our rectangular shape that will fit in really nice. I was trying to crush the round tubing, and it just wasn't working. It was turning into a mess. So by doing this, what I did on the other side was I used this, and then I slit and shaped the round tubing to that piece, and you can see how it kind of turned out. So I sanded and blended it, and I got most of the pits out, but it's kind of a nice flow. It goes from the from the round, and then just kind of flows right into it. So when it's all said and done, I think that looks pretty darn good. Like I said, the worst part of this being off the shelf is a little gaps in the corners, but I think I can work around that and be careful, and it won't warp on me too much. But that's the solution I found for this. If you guys are doing this stuff, this is exactly what a hot rodder, I think, back in the day would have done. You dig around in your shelf for what you have that already has that shape, and I probably could have made some fancy die to push or stamp that rectangular shape into it, but it's kind of neat using old Ford parts to make other old Ford parts. So I'm going to work on getting this other large, I think it's 2 1/4 tubing with our U-bend. I'm going to cut that off for that center cylinder, and then I'll slit the ends and get it to fit this little adapter piece, weld it all together on the bench, and then we could start fitting it to the header. All right, so I got the hole cut and sanded out. Like I said, this one I made it a little harder on myself because we got that tacked, so we have to do some more stuff on the car, but that's just the way that I was able to do it kind of by myself. So these little, I've talked about these a bunch, but these little Eastwood stitch weld magnets are a lifesaver when you work alone or you need an extra set of hands. So this is a perfect example. I need to fit these pieces all up together and get some stuff tacked, and I don't have enough hands. It fits pretty well, but just because of gravity, I can't get everything to kind of jive. So I'm going to use these magnets to help me here, and hopefully get everything to kind of sit how I want. And you just got to play with them. You can't get the magnet too close to where you want to weld, especially with a TIG welder, because it'll act all crazy, and the weld would just turn out like a big mess. So usually I use it for like the first tack, and then after that I can usually get rid of it. If you get a tack or two on it, it's usually strong enough. If you get a good tack, it's usually strong enough that you're okay. So I got this pretty good here, and looking pretty good. Push that back just a hair. I have a torch set at 75 amps. It's probably a little on the high side, but especially when I'm tacking, I want to get a good strong tack. So see if these, I got too many magnets here, it'll tell me real quick. I got it, but that pop it and carry on is too many magnets on there. That weld, I'll need to grind and adjust. All right, so I buttoned up the other side, went way quicker. Obviously, I learned a bunch of things on the first side. The second side, the main thing that took so long was getting the pipe angle and height and everything like that. Pretty close to matching on the driver's side, and I got it pretty darn good. I took both the sets of headers off and put them on the vise, and I worked around them and did some more welding just to get everything tied in real good. Now I do need to spend another probably like day of welding to do the welding around the flanges and all that stuff, but I need to fixture that down so that they stay nice and flat. I just wanted to get everything welded enough so you can get the idea, and also so that my tack welds wouldn't break if somebody like bumped into it or we had to pull something off. I wanted to make sure that they stayed put and they would be good to go. So I am going to be building pipes that are going to come out the bottom and go back and hide under the car for full exhaust, but we'll be doing all that stuff as well as the cap. When we have it on the lift, I can do all that stuff later on, but for now I just wanted to get more of the attitude into the car, and it kind of gives you the side profile of the car. Is just like so kick-ass now. I'm really psyched on it, and it was a fun little project. So next we got to work on some rust repair. That's my next big stuff on the car, but this was a fun break from doing rust repair and making floors and all that kind of stuff. So that is my header build for the Schroll 32 Coupe. Let me know what you think of the new set of headers that we put on this car. Thanks guys for watching. Catch you later.